today we have the opportunity to listen to 4 amazing women who are working in tech, and we're also going to be acknowledging the gender gap in this industry. Through all of the highs and lows, our panelists are going to be sharing how they are thriving in a male-dominated industry. So to get things kicked off, I would love to introduce you to today's moderator, Amy Bett. Amy is a business coach and the host of the Choice podcast with Amy Bett, and she's also my sister. So she started her career working for the Cotton On Group, and she's managed their collective charity fund runs around Australia, which has raised millions of dollars for children's healthcare. She went on then to become a founder of Minute-Pre Events. But after struggling with managing business operations and cash flow, she became passionate about studying health, mindset, and business. Amy now supports other businesses to manage their money, master their mindset, and focus on business strategies that work. Okay, thank you so much, Amy. I'll let you kick it off now.
Thank you, Laura. That was an awesome introduction, especially from my sister. Welcome, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I'm equally as excited to have the opportunity to talk to 3 incredible women today in tech. But before I introduce them, I just wanted to quickly remind you of what Laura said. We really want this conversation to be interactive and to hear your voice. So when the polls come up, when I mention them, if you could please participate by selecting what answer resonates with you the most. And then also feel free to put any questions in the chat box. There's a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to put any questions in there, and we will do our best to answer them throughout the session and also at the Q&A section at the end. But let's introduce our beautiful panel today. We have Gretchen Scott. She's the Community Manager of Cloudflare and the Director of Women Who Code Melbourne. We have Linda Lay. She's a full stack developer at Zendesk. And we have Jackie Listow, founder of Women in Security Network. So hello, women. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies. I might start by just asking you to introduce yourself and letting us know a little bit about your company and your role previous to what you're doing now. We might start with you, Gretchen.
Great. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being up so early and joining us, everyone else. As was said, I'm the community manager at Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a tech company that's existing to build a better internet, in essence, and that's in terms of security and reliability. Before that, I was actually a resident at Stone & Chalk. I was the COO at Link, which was a startup, so I got to experience all the community and the support and the love that was on offer at Stone & Chalk, but we got acquired by Cloudflare, which is how I ended up in this role. In addition, though, I'm the director of Women Who Code Melbourne, which is a meetup group, nonprofit, and we exist to support. This is true working from home. See ya. My youngest is off to school. Action shots, sorry. So we hold monthly meetups, and 1 month will be around a technical skill and the other month will be professional development. So please sign up for those along the way too. I've got the door opening again. Sorry. That's pretty much me in 95 seconds, I reckon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Linda, would you mind sharing as well? Welcome.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, and happy International Women's Day to everyone for yesterday. So yeah, my name is Linda. I'm a full stack developer at Zendesk. So we make customer support software based out of San Francisco. We have global engineering offices all over the world, and we basically make various different types of customer support software. So each office sort of will work on different products and stacks. I'm fairly new to tech and working as a software developer. So I've been working in the tech industry as a software developer for the past 2 years. Before my current role at Zendesk, I did an internship at JB Hi-Fi. And then prior to that, my entry point into tech was doing a coding bootcamp. So my career before that is pretty varied. I've kind of done a little bit of everything. So I did accounting and marketing in my previous lives, kind of jumped around a lot of different things. So my career journey has definitely been a big zigzag into lots of different sort of rabbit holes along the way. I'm also the chapter lead for Muses Code.js, which basically runs introductory coding workshops aimed to diversify the tech industry and basically give women, trans folk, non-binary folk an opportunity to give coding a go in a very supportive environment. That was, again, part of the community that helped make me find my way into tech. So those are really the areas that I gravitate towards and really passionate about.
Wow, so multi-passionate. It's amazing to hear your story in the lead up. Thank you so much. And Jackie, welcome. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, sure. So Jackie Listow, I've been in security for nearly 2 decades now. Wow. I work as a principal security consultant at Sin Security, and the aim there is to help small businesses with their cybersecurity. Before that, I was head of security, influence and behaviour at ANZ Bank, job sharing with an amazing other lady. So we did 3 days each, which was really great. And I started off in a very technical, I was a help desk. I went to PC support, Unix administrator, worked overseas for 14 years, came back, and I started the Australian Women in Security Network 5 years ago. And the aim of that organisation, it's a not-for-profit, is to connect, support and inspire women in security. We're trying to get more women that are to get into this really amazing industry and also to stay. So we do that through events, mentor program and training.
Thank you so much. Another incredible journey. It's so inspiring to hear where you've all come from and what you're doing now. And it's awesome to have you here because you all have such a different take on gender diversity in the workplace. So we're going to jump into our first poll now. So Sam, if you wouldn't mind putting the poll onto the screen. Our first poll is, where is your company at now with embedding a gender diverse culture? So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. We have, first of all, the steps are we have awareness. So basically that means training and educating and your leaders and team about what gender diversity means. And then we have engagement. So it's you understanding what your role is to have a gender diverse culture within your organization. And then there's the embedding. So that's actually the implementation, and your company has a behavioral change and you're actually living and breathing a gender diverse culture in your organization right now, or you haven't really thought about it before. So if you could please vote now, that would be amazing. And we're going to discuss the results in just a moment. Okay, so I can see it. Perfect. It's gone now. That means that everyone must have voted. Thank you so much. And I will just wait for the results to come up on the screen as well. And I'll discuss them. We'll discuss them with our panelists here today. Perfect. Okay, so 45% of you said that you're at awareness stage, which means that you are really in the process of training and educating your leaders and your team about what it means to have a gender diverse team. 18% of you said that you're at the engagement phase. So that's really understanding what role you play when it comes to being gender diverse. And then 27% are at the embedding stage. So you really feel as though your organisation has a great hold on gender diversity and you're actually implementing it into your company. And then 9% actually haven't really thought about it. So that's actually really interesting to hear. Gretchen, were you surprised about those results?
I am a little, in that almost 30% was sitting at the engagement phase. I thought a lot of people would be stuck in the awareness phase a little bit beforehand, which seems to be, from my experience, where you see a lot of holding patterns happen. People go, yes, this is a thing. I need to do something about it. I'm going to make a poster. And then they kind of sit in that phase and don't know how to do actionable steps or move forward from there. So that's quite inspiring to see that organizations are actually trying to make a pathway forward with steps. I like that. I guess where I am at now in my team is beautiful. There's 11 of us in a technical team, and out of the 11, 8 are women, and the 2 leadership positions in it are held by women. And what that has done is really enforce, I guess, the embedding stage you've talked about, because we live and breathe that experience. But that's not to be said, it's throughout the whole organization. And I think it's a work in progress for all teams, to be fair.
No, absolutely. I was with you, Gretchen. I was as well surprised that there was a lot of people in the engagement stage, which is great. It is inspiring. What about yourself, Linda?
Yeah, so I guess I'd echo Gretchen's sentiments in the sense that I'm surprised, pleasantly surprised that it was higher than I expected. And I suppose what I'm always really curious about is to hear what companies are doing specifically, because I feel like there is so much good intent out there, and I feel like there are so many different facets to the problem. I don't think there's any one company or one solution that's solving all of these problems. And I think depending on the work context that you're in, the challenges that you're facing and what improving gender diversity means in those companies is very, very different. So again, I'd always love to hear what different companies are doing. I suppose in my context, the tech industry, as we know it, is not particularly diverse, and working in a more technical field, it's definitely sort of where you see the biggest sort of lack of general diversity, not just gender diversity. I suppose in my company, the biggest sort of what I can see the most is probably more around mindset, and I guess in terms of like our general sort of recruiting practices. I think in the last few years they've made a big impact in terms of trying to hire more diversity, not just gender diversity. They've managed to improve it quite significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. I think we went from having a tech team that had about 6 or 7 women to about 60. That's basically been a long effort, and I suppose and it's one facet of the sort of problem. So I think they've made a lot of great strides there, but I think as always there are definitely areas that we can improve, and I only point to that specifically as like one example, but I firmly believe that isn't the one solution to everything, and there are still many other facets, but that's probably what I wanted to highlight as sort of the biggest sort of difference that we can see in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And Jackie, so were you surprised by the results, and what's working well in your company at the moment with embedding a gender diverse culture in your organisation?
So for myself, I wasn't actually surprised. I agree that I like to see that, we're past that point of people understanding what the benefits are of diversity, and it's more, a lot of people are having awareness of it. I know that in the last 5 years, the discussion's changed. Instead of people asking me to go and do, why is diversity important? It's, okay, what are the actionable steps that I can do to actually change things? And that's really, I think we're progressing in the right way, that awareness stage. And also I'm finding that now that I'm in startup land, that there's a lot more discussions, and they're all making subconscious decisions about recruitment and embedding that from day one when they're actually building their startup. So where we are at Cinch, we're 50-50 in terms of, female-male ratio, as well as cultural as well. So they really are trying to build that diverse team, not just with gender, but also for, different backgrounds. We've got young people also in there as well. And I think that's really important that they have actually started that from starting out their company. That's the kind of company that they wanted to build, and they've done it from the start, which is really great.
50-50, that is incredible. That's really inspiring to hear. Before we move on to our next topic, does anyone else have anything that they would like to share about what your organisation is doing well, or do you think that you covered it? All good?
I think can I jump in for a nanosecond? I really want to echo what Linda and Jackie said around gender diversity is not the only metric here. I know it's an International Women's Day talk, but the broader diversity is such an important conversation. And the recruitment piece and the setting the culture from day zero, it's so much easier. So I've been in a startup, and that was very much, we are going to be 50-50 and as diverse as we can be from day zero. And that's the company that got acquired by Cloudflare. And that's in many ways an easier pathway to take than retrofitting and breaking down the culture that was possibly not ideal, but built without consideration. So there's a whole two different pathways there happening. And it's great to hear, both Linda and Jackie from 2 different organizations doing it 2 different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for pointing that out, Gretchen. It is really important that we think about diversity on a whole level rather than just the gender. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront now. So let's move on to the tech products that we build. And how having how having diversity in your workplace actually then helps you to serve your customer on a much better level, because you're thinking about your customer from a whole different mindset rather than just, I guess, the male mindset, or in other diverse topics as well. So Jackie, would you mind please telling us about how having a diverse workforce has really helped you to build better tech products?
Yeah, sure. So if we think about, the population, it's 50-50 females and males. So, what we're building in terms of our tech products has to cater for all types of different, gender, but also, the people that we are, selling to or trying to get to buy our tech products are from different nationalities as well. So of course you need those different perspectives. I think a lot of people understand that now, I hope. And I guess in the security industry, we have a lot of challenges that are new. And so when we're tackling different problems, it's really great to have those different perspectives. So when we're trying to, for example, do a penetration test on, a particular organization, the different perspectives of how we can actually try and, get in is one way that, different people with different mindsets can actually put, their minds together to find different problems. We've also found that communicating as well, the way that you communicate to different types of people, the board, or senior managers, or people that are parents, etc. It's really important to be able to have those different viewpoints in terms of how somebody would interpret a piece of advice, or how they would interpret how to use a particular piece of technology. So I think that there's a lot of facets which diversity in mindset can really, really make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. What about you, Gretchen?
Yeah, I did an entire talk on this last year. It went for about 45 minutes. So let me just try and condense that down a little bit. So tech is everywhere, in every part of our lives, right? And at the moment, it's built by quite a homogenous group of people. And what ends up happening is we build products that, I guess at best, they're just a bit rubbish, right? They're not completely fit for purpose. They're a bit ill-considered, but some of them are actually really harmful as well. And there's heaps of books on this. Weapons of Math Destruction is a really good one by Cathy O'Neill, or Technically Wrong is another really good one. And it goes through all these examples of how a group of people who all look and feel and think the same built something because they thought it was a great idea, and it's just been disastrous. So there was a case of the compass recidivism algorithm. So it was designed to eliminate a judge's bias when people were sentenced for crimes in America, because they thought maybe they're being a bit racist. So we'll just do some maths, we'll write some software, that'll fix it, because maths isn't biased, except maths is really biased. It just amplifies all the things that are already wrong. So what happened with that is, if you were someone of darker skin color, you would get sentenced far more harshly than a white person, because it just amplified what was there. So I think if you had, this is me trying to get back to the short version again.
That's okay.
If you had different people with different lived experiences, different viewpoints, and not necessarily technical people involved in the discussion around building that product, I think different things would have been brought up. I think a way I like to think of it is, think about Google Maps, right? It's a useful product. You can figure out how to get from where you are to where you want to be in quite a simple way. But I think, imagine if you'd asked a group of women potentially what they would want in it, and they might have said, you know what, can you at night, or if it's after 6 p.m, can you give me a route that has street lighting? That would be great. Or if you talk to someone in a wheelchair, or with a disability, with an elderly parent, or with a pram, they might have said, can you make sure you give me a path that I can use with ramps? I think if we're not including diverse people in these conversations, we're actually just building substandard products. So there's an argument for being a good citizen and a good human and building good things that are good for society. But actually there's a really strong business case, because building a maps application that suited everyone has to be more profitable. Anyway, I'll stop on my little rant there, or else we'll go to 45 minutes just me telling stories about this.
No, I love that so much. It is so important. And I guess that comes at the initial discussion stages. When you're building products, it's thinking outside of the box and outside of your own scope. And you've just nailed it there of why it is so important to have different people in the room that have different life experiences, and I guess to do that market research into who is out there and who do we need to be supporting with our products. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Jackie, I'd love to take it to you. Can you please give us your insight into this topic?
I think you mean Linda.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry, Linda. Yes. Sorry, Jackie. I was looking at Linda.
Yeah, so I think so much of the time, I guess we kind of view a lot of this decision making as like quite benign, but it isn't. Like, who builds the software that we use, and I guess the decisions that are built into it, ideally reflect the world and the values that we in the world today. And I think a lot of the decision making around like who is building these products, and I think it is so much easier to build the right product from the start than it is to basically to try and go and retroactively fix these problems. And so much of the technology that exists in the world today, we see the effect of that. Like, it would shock you the amount of websites that if you run it through sort of a basic accessibility checker, just aren't accessible, and the cost that that companies have had to outlay to now retroactively try to fix these websites or to fix these applications to make them accessible. I think when it comes to sort of when it comes to these kind of products, like, they reflect the cultural dimensions of the people who built it. And I think from my own experience, I can only reflect on the fact that I suppose the company that I work in now, we have our product is basically used in over 30 countries in the world, which means that there are so many different other cultural considerations that we have to take into account. Like, for example, in Western countries, we read from left to right, whereas like there are other countries where text is read right to left. So in terms of like how you localize and internationalize products, how you go about building them, and the different considerations are involved, those things are just things that don't necessarily occur to you unless you have people there who are aware of these things. And this is reflected from the beginning to end of the development of these different products. So I don't know, I think for me, like, what's really important, and what I've, I guess, seen, at least in the company that I work in now, internationalization and localization is something that's been considered from the start. So we have global engineering offices across like 10 different countries. The teams that I've worked in, there've been instances where I've been the only person that's Australian or of Asian descent on the team. And I think it's just really, you can basically just see the differences when you have people who come from different contexts. And it doesn't just reflect, I guess, who they are at work, but all of these other sort of dimensions that they have both inside and outside of work. And I think, it creates better, happier teams, but it also makes better products as well. And I think, like, just having that different perspective and just having that cultural awareness, but also like cultural exposure, like working with people who have those different perspectives, like, I think it's just a much better way to work. But you can see how that just basically makes better products as well.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So, Linda, for yourself, how does the conversation start within your organisation to bring, I guess, the conversation of diversity in your products to the forefront? Does it start at the very initial stages, or is it something that's brought up all the way along the journey?
I think it has to be across the entire journey. Like, I think it's really impossible to sort of divorce those different stages, because I think different considerations come into play. And also, I guess, like the culture that those products exist in, as in like the company that you exist in, like that also is basically something that starts from day one. Like, just as an example, like, for example, at my work, whenever you write code and you push code to sort of our main sort of code base, we have an inclusive language check, which was developed internally and is basically just meant to be an internally developed tool that will basically check our code and our code base for inclusive language. Because even if you look at the tech industry, it is riddled with all of these sort of like former hang-ups and language hangovers that we still haven't quite really been able to shake off. Like, even being able to move away from that has been a huge technical challenge. So for example, GitHub, which is one of our sort of main repositories that we use for like version control, and it's basically the way in which developers are able to collaborate with code. You know, recently they renamed one of their sort of conceptual sort of I'm trying to figure out how to describe this, but they renamed their conceptual there's a concept of a branch, and they recently renamed that from master to main, and that's been just like a small but significant shift in terms of just the day-to-day language that developers use, and just I guess like the normalization of it and the denormalization of it. They're sort of small but hugely significant changes that I think people from more marginalized groups can really readily understand the importance and the significance of these changes. But I think there is sometimes attitudes around like, it seems like such a minor thing with such a costly effort. What's the benefit of it? And I think like it's these small things that you've really got to chip away at, however big or however small, because I think they do accumulate over time. But I think when you're looking at sort of one change to another, they seem small, but they have a huge impact over time. And I think these are the things that we really have to sort of work away at. These things do matter, despite the fact that there are people who sort of dismiss their significance because, I don't know, I guess the impact versus the effort, it's always that trade-off between the two. But I really think that those things are important.
I couldn't agree more. And before we move on to our next poll, I just wanted to ask another quick question for anyone here in our audience that is in the process of building their own tech products, or they're researching the idea about it. What are some tips that the three of you may have for anyone to think about, or how do they do research into what they need to consider to include the different demographics and gender in their products? Do you have any advice there?
I absolutely. Sorry.
Thank you, Gretchen. No, that's
always
perfect.
Have something to say. This is starting to be the theme. When you're building a product, and particularly in tech, I think there's a tendency to be dismissive of people who don't write code or don't know tech or don't live in that world. And the language, there's a high barrier to entry to technology. There's so much lingo that's not easily translatable. And I think it creates an unintentional arrogance and roadblocking of people whose voices need to be heard inside. So when you're building a new product or your new startup, I think one of the best things you can do is go out to the actual people who will be using your product and treat their words and their lived experience with more reverence than you do your new CTO, because you're solving the problem for them. They know what they need. You may think you do, which is good. You've identified a problem, I'm assuming, but taking information and opinions from people with lived experience is worth so much. So start there.
That's awesome, Gretchen. And just to go one step further into that, where do you suggest people start with actually finding their people? Is it going to market research companies, or where can they start?
Well, you could. That can be quite expensive though, right? If you're just, you could actually just go and talk to friends or friends of friends, or say, hey, Stone and Chalk, do you know anyone who does this? I think you find with social media and your networks, you can easily get in touch with people and people who know people, and it will be the cost of a coffee and some of your time.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Jackie, would you like to add anything there?
Oh, just to echo what Gretchen just said, go out to the people that will be using your product and have an open mind. So interview them during that requirement stage. So you're not trying to, and to Linda's point, you're not retrofitting the product later on when you realize that maybe the reason why you're not getting take up is because the product isn't fit for purpose.
Thank you. And Linda, just lastly, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, just to echo what's been said before, like get it in the hands of the people that you're using it. But in particular, if they're part of a marginalized group, don't ask them to work for free. Make sure you're paying them for their time. You need to actually build trust in that community as well, in order to prove that you're actually there to genuinely solve the problem there, rather than to just simply go in and to make a quick buck with all of your previous assumptions. And also at the same time, like leverage the tools that are out there. So, identify using research the groups that or who your users actually are, but then also use like tools that are out there. So if you're creating a product for people who have experienced some form of disability, make sure that you're using the right accessibility tools to actually test that and validate that. So you're not asking disabled people to educate you on what they need as well. So do your research and use the tools that are out there, but then speak to the people that are there and pay them.
Oh my gosh, yes, I take back my coffee comment 10 times.
No, thank you so much. You've really actually opened my eyes into how much there is actually to think about when creating products. There's so many different facets and elements that come into creating great tech products and to making sure that you're really being inclusive of our whole, diverse culture and the different demographics that we have. So thank you. And I hope that a lot of people here really got a lot out of where they can actually tangibly go to make sure that they're thinking about it from the start of building their product. So let's move on to our next poll. And I'll get Sam to bring it up onto the screen again. It's what are your biggest challenges when it comes to gender diversity in your workplace? So they don't take it seriously. They don't understand the business impact if gender diversity was ignored. They aren't reporting bad cultural behaviours, or there's no challenges, our people are all over it. So I'll give you about 30 seconds now just to press where you're at with your workplace. Okay, so the results are in. 13% have said that they don't take it seriously. 25% have said that your organisation doesn't understand the business impact if gender diversity was ignored. 38% has said that bad cultural behaviours are not being reported, so they aren't reporting bad cultural behaviours, and 25% has said no challenges, our people are all over it. Okay, that's actually really interesting. Linda, I wanted to start with you. Were you surprised with those results? And what are some actual action takeaways that we can give our audience today about how they can be really thinking about this?
Yeah, so in terms of 38% agreeing, basically saying that, like that doesn't really surprise me. I think, as we've sort of covered already, I think in general, like businesses and people generally understand the moral case and I guess the business case as to why gender diversity is important and why diversity in general is important. I think in the day-to-day, I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we face now. And I think in general, like I can't drill in deeper with some of those answers, but my feeling would probably be that a lot of these sort of like bad behaviors that they experience are probably not people who are sort of being outright sexist or racist or basically, I think generally speaking, people are sort of smart enough to know like where there is a clear right or wrong. But I feel like so much of these sort of bad behaviors would come down to sort of more, microaggressions or sort of more minor subtle behaviors and subtle comments that are around like inclusive and exclusive behavior and those type of things. And I think it's definitely a challenge, because I think if you're one of the few women, person of color, few sort of LGBTQI stuff, like it's very, very difficult to sort of take on the cultural, the emotional labor and burden of having to sort of like wear these behaviors, to monitor these, and to be in a situation where you see or hear these behaviors and I think your instinct or your gut feeling towards these kind of behaviors stands out to you, and you probably notice things that other people in your team may not. And I don't think it's malicious. I think there are just people out there who genuinely have lived experiences that don't make them aware of these types of biases or these types of behaviors. And on the one hand, as much as I would love to say, like, if you see injustice, always speak out for it. If you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you're part of a sort of minority group, the burden of having to speak for all of those people and having to constantly defend that position is a heavy burden to carry. And increasingly, I'm more ambivalent of those kind of situations, because I don't believe that it's up to that person who's part of that minority group to always speak up and to always defend that. I really feel like it is the responsibility of businesses, it is the responsibility of allies, it is a shared responsibility to speak up about this. And in those kind of situations, I suppose, like, it is up to you, the individual, if you experience that, whether or not you want to sort of to fight that battle or to raise that point, because sometimes the microaggressions are numerous and many, and sometimes the more you bring them up, the more of a target or the more weight it carries in that situation. It really should be an education piece to sort of teach those people and to teach individual businesses to basically start to recognize those behaviors. So for me, I guess in those kind of situations, it is up to you whether or not you want to like bring that up yourself, or whether or not you want to pull that person quietly or speak to a manager or speak to someone, and to bring that up quietly, to briefly explain your piece. Sometimes, like if I see those situations, rather than me trying to re-explain that whole piece, I'll basically quickly say the point. I'll usually send an article where someone's already done that emotional labor. I can explain that point far better than I can, and I leave it be. Other times, if it's a hill that I'm prepared to die on, I will bring that point and I will argue it to death. But at the same time, I think it's so important that you have to learn to manage your own sanity, and to really be able to I guess like choose when and where you want to bring those things up. But it's also not your responsibility to fight that battle all the time. It is totally okay to say, okay, I'm not prepared to have this fight today, so I'm just going to take a step back, and hopefully someone else has noticed. And if there isn't, then it's up to you how you want to manage the situation. But I think you want to stand up for injustice, but you also need to basically look after yourself.
I really hope that soon our organisations feel like a safe space to be able to share and to speak up. I think there is still quite a lot of work to go. Gretchen, I'd like to go to you now. Were you shocked by the results, and can you share a story about how you've been impacted and how you've overcome it?
I wasn't shocked. I think probably there's so much information now about the business case for good diversity and inclusion programs that anyone not on board with that is probably remiss in their duties of running a business. Would be my short take. I just want to add to Linda's story. I love that she recognized the emotional labor that goes into calling out the microaggressions and the chaos, because, for example, you could hear this guy going, hey guys, hey guys, hey guys. And if you go to management and go, hey, Steve keeps saying guys, you sound like you're in prep, just telling tales on the kid beside you, right? But language is important and has so many implications. And I think one of the ways I've seen that use of language change to where you want it to be well is with Slack bots. So, in your general, Slack is a communication channel where you write stuff. One of the Slack groups I'm in has an automated bot that if anyone writes guys in it, it automatically pops up with a link that says, we don't use that. We don't say that here, and this is why. And so it's fully automated, which takes all the emotional labor off the people around you. And you're just sent off without feeling like you've been told off by someone. You're just educated. And it's not like, oh, Linda told me off, she's so uptight. It's all of that is gone, and it's just an automated process. And I think that can work really well. But in terms of one of my lived experiences that I find it's exhausting, and it's another microaggression. And it's around, if you're a woman in technology, often you're asked to justify and qualify your reasons for being there and having an opinion and knowledge before you're heard. So for example, if I've got a background in operations research, which is maths for people that can't do pure maths at uni, like it's applied maths. And so often that's around modeling different scenarios and optimizing them. And I was at a talk and they asked the same question, tell us a time of, what experience have you had that's really frustrating? And is that whenever I would talk in a corporate setting and have to, it might be something I know so well inside out, but I would have to lead with, because I've got a degree in this and I've done some research in that and I've had 4 years of this before I can lead into what I'm actually saying. And it takes time and you lose people's attention along the way. But on this particular panel I was on another time, I got asked that question and I said, having to qualify yourself before you're heard is just exhausting day in and day out. And then when the panel was finished, there was mingling and a guy came up to me. It was at one of the big 4 consulting companies. And he goes, what makes you think you were qualified to be on the panel? I was like, oh, dude. But and now I can laugh about it because it was so shocking. But when those things happen time and time and time and time again, what you're actually hearing is that you don't belong here. And what you're saying is not worth me hearing. And you start to internalize that a little because it's just tiresome. And you can't really, it's the same as saying, Steve talked over me. It feels like you're telling on someone in grade 1. So it feels like you're imagining it. but it also has a really big impact. But in saying that, I think I've got one of the best counters to it in the entire universe. And Jackie and Linda have also alluded to it as well. And that's the community groups that you can become a part of, who can support you and help you assess what was going on and think it through, and give you ways of, I guess, mitigating the impact on you, but also implementing change outwards. And I think one of the biggest changes actually has to come from anyone in any leadership position, whether that means your job title has management in it or not. You have a responsibility to make sure that people on your team are heard and respected and supported. So how's that for throwing it back on everyone else? So either get a Slack bot to fix all the language, or actually, no, do both. Get Slack bots set up so it fixes all the language. And if you're in leadership, listen to your people.
No, that's great, Gretchen. I love that there's a Slack bot that does that. That is awesome. That is so cool. I'm going to remind the teams that I work with of that, or let them know, because I hadn't heard of that before. And when you said community groups, Gretchen, so where can people find those community groups? Is that Facebook groups or?
Wow. Yes and no. It depends what flavor you need, I would say. And there are so many different types and styles, and they're all really supportive of each other. So for example, Jackie's got the AWSN, which I always want to go along to, and it makes me want to get into security because that's such a cool group of humans. Linda is involved with Muses JS. I'm involved with Women Who Code Melbourne. They're all, I say all, I don't know if Jackie's is, most of them are listed on Meetup. But aside from that, I think if you talk to anyone in the tech community, they can allude to all the groups that are out there. And there are so many. So we've talked about 3. There's at least 10 others I can think of. And it's really important, I think, to try all of them, and because they all give you slightly different things. They're a slightly different mix of people. Some might be good for what you're going through this week. Some might give you opportunities for in a month. So look on Meetup, I would say. But once you start talking to people in the industry, they'll send you on a journey to find all the other groups.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. So Jackie, do you mind talking to us now about an experience that you've heard or experienced yourself in the workplace? And then do you have any takeaways that people can try and campaign in their own workplace, and to make sure that we get to move to that embedded stage, and how they can thrive in a male-dominated industry? That's a loaded question. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, Jackie.
There's a few questions in one there, and I wanted to respond to so many things that Gretchen and Linda were saying as well. So my story was, I was very fortunate to work for a particular company where they were really supportive of myself. So we had some offshore kind of developers that came on site, and every time I was in a meeting, they would talk to the man next to me instead of myself, which, to Gretchen's point, it's like, oh, can I? And I felt like I had to continuously try to show my credibility in terms of, like, I actually know what I'm talking about. Listen to me. You don't need to speak to my manager next to me. And then it wasn't until my manager actually brought it up. He put me to the side and went, "Why is that guy always speaking to me and not you? Because you're the project manager." And I'm like, "I really don't know." And he said, "I'm taking him aside. I'm going to have a word with him." So he actually took it upon himself to actually have a word with that person. So that was great, because for me, I felt really uncomfortable. I didn't want to approach the guy and say to him, "Hey, is there a problem with me?" or something like that, because it puts us in a really awkward position. But this manager recognized it straight away, and he spoke to the person. The guy went, "Oh, I didn't even realize," and he made some excuses. But then from that point onwards, it was a much smoother relationship and partnership. So I think that having that ally within your organization or in your team is really important, because they're the ones that can kind of help champion you and help you when other people might not want to be listening to you in that room, unfortunately. And to Gretchen's point before about the whole, you're trying to tell people, okay, I've got credibility, and it kind of then wears on your confidence as well, which is really, really difficult. And that also spirals into self-doubts. So when it comes to the women in your team, sometimes if you continuously don't listen to them in the room, they are constantly having to justify themselves. You'll sometimes see them in a meeting potentially not saying anything because they want to say something intelligent and not seem stupid or ask silly questions, when actually, they have really great ideas and they just want to be heard. So, trying to encourage people to speak out and listen to them, I think is a really important thing. So actively encourage people to speak out, I think is an important thing. And also to have good role models as well. So having really good leaders in an organization can really make a big difference.
Isn't that amazing that you had someone so strong next to you that actually called it out on your behalf? I love that so much. And thank you for sharing that. Before I move on, does anyone have anything else that they'd like to add, or you're happy for me to move on?
I'd just like to make one quick point, just on following what Jackie was saying. So I remember reading in the Obama administration, Obama's female staffers had this concept of amplification, where they had noticed that, continually in meetings, one woman would put forth an idea and it would be sort of dismissed or just ignored, and then another male colleague would say it and they would sort of latch onto it. So they would have this concept of amplification, where if one woman would repeat it, the other in the room or the other women in the room would make a point of like reiterating it, but also giving attribution to the woman who said it. So basically just this idea of like, I think what, Jackie said is a great idea. I would like to sort of follow up on what Gretchen had said. That I really love that concept, but it also requires for there to be more than one woman in the room. So if you're the only woman in the room, that doesn't really necessarily solve your problem. But at the same time, if you can get allies to be more conscious and aware of this sort of thing, I think that's already like a great concept to keep in mind.
Thank you so much, Linda. Anyone else? Are you happy for me to move on? Okay, great. So I think to amplify what Gretchen, Linda, and Jackie were all just saying about it's really important to have leaders that are really, I guess, campaigning this within the organisation. I'm going to read this because I think it's important. So going from awareness to engagement and then to embedding is a process, not an event. You need top-down support from management, a strong understanding of your team and the culture within, ongoing training, changes to workplace policies, and strong communication that drives inclusivity across the board. So how do you know when your company is making a shift towards an empowering and diverse workplace culture for women in the tech industry? And I want to talk about success measures now. So how you personally, I guess, measure success of creating a diverse culture within your organization, and how you can help others to listen what you want to implement, and how you've, I guess, measured the action steps. So I'm going to start to you, Jackie. How do you measure the success of how you're going in this implementation phase?
So I'll talk maybe more generally. So I've seen one company that's done it really well. So they have, done all the things that you just mentioned in terms of, training for women and really actively in their recruitment process, looking for female candidates, which is really good. The other thing is that they've actually gone even the next step further, and they're looking after the community. So they're sponsoring 80%, for example. They're also, giving scholarships, and they're, trying to show that they are a place that really encourages females, that really look after females in their organisation. They also do videos of, the women that are actually doing great things in their organisation, and they're really amplifying and trying to, encourage those women that are within their organisation, to go further and to climb up the ladder as well, and to promote them, etc., because they deserve it. So I think that some of those success measures come from, people wanting to work for that organization as well. So that's a really good sign. And, an increase in the number of candidates. I mean, in security, we don't have many, females that are around, but the fact that people do approach these organizations that are really trying to do something, I think is a real testament to companies that are making that conscious effort and trying to, change that gender gap.
Thank you very much. I love that one of the organizations is really profiling women. That is great. So I feel like our audience would have gotten a lot out of that. What about you, Gretchen? Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
No, I keep having helicopters fly over, so I keep muting because it's so noisy. But just to follow on, Jackie covered so much of that. And Melbourne in particular, there are some great tech companies who have been really consciously focused on doing the right thing and hiring a lot of women, putting resources into retraining, upskilling, and recruiting women, and actively reaching out to them to apply for jobs at those organizations. And what that's done is that, you know, as a diverse candidate, you know which organizations you can go into and be supported and encouraged. Not to say they're perfect, because I don't think anyone has got there yet, and there still are a lot of road bumps, but you know which organizations just not to even waste your time with. So I think there's probably a few companies around that are they're kind of put on a list of, I won't go there until their entire leadership team is rechanged, and they won't even have a clue that that's what's going on. But also what I love in Melbourne in particular is there's a great tech company that did huge work around recruiting women into their tech teams. And then they turned around and realized that what they'd inadvertently done is hire a whole junior women, which meant the culture was kind of like, oh, it's all men in leadership and it's all women doing the junior roles. And that was not their intent in any way, shape or form. And how it played out, they did a lot of metrics and measuring, because I think you have to measure how many, like the diversity of your teams in all ways. You need to measure who's staying, who's getting promoted, who's not getting promoted. All those things actually need to be measured and tracked, so you can keep an eye on it. But they realized that women were leaving their organization, and when they were like, why, what's happening, why are you leaving, the people were like, well, I can't see a pathway for me, because there was no one, they felt like there was nowhere for them to go, because there was no one like them in the upper echelons. So credit to the company, they started recruiting in the high management roles, very actively looking for diverse people. And there was a whole team they had that was actually just focused on making sure diverse people applied and went through the application process. So they're kind of not handheld, but just made sure they didn't drop off or get distracted by not updating their resume, because that's a rubbish job no one ever does. But also at the end of the day, I think controversially, I'm quite a fan of quotas. You have to have goals in mind and you have to try and achieve them. And how do you do that? If, you know, a quota is a goal, it's a metric, and it should be, I think, a goal that management's remuneration is tied to. I think we have triggers and levers to make people behave in certain ways. We use them like all the time. So let's use them to make our workforce is diverse.
Absolutely. That's really interesting and a really fair thing to say about quotas. I really like that. Just before I ask Linda her thoughts, this is the time where we're about to go to Q&A. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask any of our brilliant panelists, make sure that you put your question into the Q&A chat box area and we will bring it up in just a few moments. So Linda, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so just basically 2 points. First of all, yeah, women in general, but women in tech in particular talk. I think the fantastic thing is like, because you're so outnumbered, like I think it really fosters a sense of like, I don't know, sisterhood, in the sense that I find that the tech industry is where I've experienced the strongest sense of community, and I find that there is so much support available, whether it's like really tangible support in terms of resources, whether it's emotional support, whether it's advice, whether it's a sounding board. I think it's all of that is out there. So in terms of like groups that you can connect with, like Gretchen said, if you talk to any woman in tech, they could rattle off like a group for any kind of problem or area or stage in your career that you're at. So please like reach out and just ask. It's one of the hardest things to do. And I know that it's incredibly difficult to put yourself out there, particularly when you're sort of in that early career stage, but there is so much out there, and you'll also get a really good sense of where are the good places to work, who is doing these things well, who are creating safe spaces that you would actually want to invest your time in. Because you already face numerous challenges once you get there. So you basically just want to make sure that you're in a place that is actually worth your time, because the tech industry needs you more than you need them, honestly, in many different ways. So basically just take advantage of that and make sure that you're spending your time in spaces that deserve your attention. And second of all, I think the places that are doing particularly well when it comes to improving diversity are ones who are sort of going above and beyond the standard sphere of things that we've talked about. So recruiting is one really important aspect. It's often the starting point for a lot of these companies, but the ones who are doing it really well are basically looking really hard at things like promotion, career progression, pay transparency, that sort of thing. So I would say like seek out the companies that are doing beyond just the sort of the standard or the norm, because I think a lot of the initiatives that we've talked about now, they should be what's considered part of the norm, or this should basically be what you're doing already, and you don't get a cookie just for doing the basics.
That is awesome. Thank you very much, Linda. I know that today my eyes have been really open, especially with what there is to think about when implementing a diverse culture into your organisation. So I really, really appreciate you taking your time today to come and share with us. We actually haven't got any questions in our chat box today. I think you've covered everything so well that people have really taken in what you've said, and I know that you would have really given a lot of actionable insights into what we can do to make sure that, one, we're really thinking about the ongoing awareness stage, that we need to be continuing the conversation in our workplace on an ongoing basis. Then obviously what we can do to understand our role in diversity and inclusivity, and then the action steps, because I think that's when we're going to obviously see the change, is when we're thinking about it at all times like you are, and going for it and taking action to make sure that we're all thought about, we're all included as women, and also the different demographics that we have. So thank you so very much for joining us today. And yeah, we really, really appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone as well that's listened in. I hope that you got the insight, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the week. It's celebrating women this week, International Women's Day, and I think it's a whole week. So thank you very much.